Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm the Rambling Director. Merry Christmas. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my very favorite versions of A Christmas Carol. It's one that I haven't talked about yet, simply because years and years and years ago, when I first saw it on TV, I didn't remember liking it very much. And in fact, I think I like it now only because I'm an adult. I think that this probably was not one that I would have ever really enjoyed much as a kid. And that being said, I actually think this version does what the Guy Pearce version was trying desperately to do and failing, which was to give a little bit of a dark, cynical, almost cruel edge to everything, but it does so without having to turn the main character into a psychopath and completely destroy his redemptive arc, which is kind of the point of the entire story of A Christmas Carol. This film, ironically enough, is a Hallmark movie made in collaboration with TNT. So, if you're not a big fan of Hallmark movies, oh, they're always cheesy and goofy or whatever, you need to take a step back because the Hallmark Channel actually used to make several shows and movies based on classic stories, which all kind of have a darker edge to them and are surprisingly a bit more geared towards an adult audience than the incredibly saccharine-covered family films that they now make, which are predominantly romances. By the way, before we get into the film, I just want to give a quick note that the costuming in this film is some of the best I've seen in any Christmas Carol. And the music is also gorgeous to listen to. There's a few selections I'm going to play for you when we get to them, and I'll put up a little marker on the screen so you can notice the music specifically, because some of these scenes, the music is the best I've heard in A Christmas Carol. Now, I did say that the George C. Scott version had the best overall music, and I stand by that, but this film does have some of the best little themes that follow certain characters, the best subtle little musical cues. And I would say that this is second in terms of the best music, obviously not including the musical versions in this. The film starts off with Marley's funeral. Now, I really like whenever they kind of fit in a new prologue or something to show us that Marley is dead, or to show us some aspect of the characters that maybe we don't typically see at the beginning. It gives us a little cue to keep an open mind that this version may do some different stuff and have some new twists on this classic tale, and it does. During this scene, there's an exchange between Scrooge and one of the people at the funeral where they actually say the lines from the opening of the book.
Dead as a doornail. Don't know what's particularly dead about a doornail.
Now, this is the best I've ever seen these lines worked into a film. Typically, a narrator just says them to the audience, but here it's dialogue, and it's not only very natural, but it gives you that little, like, I see what you did there sort of feeling. Now, while George C. Scott is my favorite Scrooge, and Alastair Sim is my second favorite, Patrick Stewart is probably my third favorite Scrooge, however, and the reason why is because of how he reads his lines. You can tell that he is one of the great Shakespearean actors of our time, because he's so good at reading these lines and interpreting them and how the inflections should fit into them, rather than just saying, "It's not convenient and it's not fair. You wouldn't think it was right if I picked your pocket every 20 seconds, or whatever, rather than just saying that line, which most Scrooges do. They kind of prattle it off because it's such an iconic, well-known line. It's hard to find a new way of saying it, but Patrick Stewart does. He says it like a real person would say it if they were saying that line for the first time, if it literally just came up on the top of their head.
It's not convenient. It's not fair. If I was to deduct half a crown for your taking the day off, you'd think yourself ill-used. You don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
I consider Patrick Stewart to be the quintessential stoic Scrooge. A lot of his mannerisms are not just the self-reservation that George C. Scott has, but rather the sort of attitude that you would see in, like, one of those old grandfathers who grew up never being told that anybody loved them and didn't really know how to show their emotions. He doesn't just hold back his emotions, rather he puts on this kind of tough front whenever he is getting emotional. In fact, the only time something really irritates him, he doesn't just get mad or start yelling, he loses his temper to the point of violence. The opening credits are really great and very cinematic in the way they are portrayed, and I think this is a good time to point your attention to the fact that Robert Zemeckis took a lot from this film. Yeah, I said before he took a lot from Seymour Hicks, and probably more from Seymour Hicks than any other version, in terms of the actual ideas. But this story, there's times the camera movement and stuff, the cinematic language that is used, it feels almost like Zemeckis directly copied some of these scenes. For instance, the prologue where we see Marley dead is not in a whole lot of versions, but we see it in a very similar sort of scene, immediately followed by Scrooge walking through the city, coming to his office. We pan up to the sign, and the sign ages 7 years to show us that Marley has been dead for 7 years, dead as a doornail. Again, it's just odd that these sequences follow each other pretty much exactly the way they do in the Zemeckis film. Also, it's kind of strange that this is possibly the most cinematic version ever besides the Zemeckis film itself, and it's only a TV movie. Some of the camera movements and cinematography and the lighting feels more theatrical than some actual theatrical productions of Scrooge. It's kind of a marvel when you think about it. Now, along the lines of being cinematic, this is a very good version in terms of showing rather than telling, or showing and telling, which is personally what I think cinema should do, is kind of a mixture of both. If you're going to have dialogue, if it's not going to be a silent movie, you should probably show and tell together to make things very clear for the audience. In this case, the introduction to Scrooge and Cratchit's relationship is phenomenal.
It's going out.
Poke it.
You get across the attitudes of these people and their dynamic with very, very little. A lot of people do the coal scuttle scene at the beginning, and yet a lot of them, you get these almost caricatures of Bob and Scrooge, whereas this, they feel like a real boss and a real undervalued employee. Patrick Stewart is just very subtle, perhaps the most subtle Scrooge. I actually think the fact that Stewart very often will keep a perfectly blank expression and just kind of move his eyes. I may have to amend my statement from last year. Patrick Stewart may actually be a little more subtle than George C. Scott. While Scott is very subtle and I believe very realistic, there is something about the way Patrick Stewart keeps a perfectly blank face, and just the softening or hardening of his eyes will tell you what he's feeling. That is the sort of thing that, like, you just don't see in many versions of this story. In this version, Fred is actually sort of the person who sends the charity workers in Scrooge's direction, and I like that change. In fact, I wouldn't have minded if they made it more direct, like they were just asking for rich people in the area, and he directly was like, "Oh, my Uncle Scrooge, go to him." I think that could have been even funnier, but, I'll take what I can get. It's still a good moment. Stewart might also give my favorite delivery of this line ever.
I support those institutions I have mentioned, and I expect the poor to make use of them. If they'd rather die, they'd better do it and decrease the surplus population.
Come to that, this may just be my favorite version of this scene ever. I really love how the charity workers who are collecting, they keep getting these questioning looks to him, and their reactions are very realistic. They don't get overly angry with him too quickly the way that they do in a lot of versions. This feels like two strangers interacting for the first time, and typically when people are asking for money, they don't get super annoyed and like, "Oh, you give me your money, you cheapskate." They don't normally do that. Normally they do kind of back off and become a little standoffish rather than outright angry. Scrooge also doesn't get overly angry or overly upset. He doesn't get loud, he doesn't yell. And in fact, in this version, he almost seems more like he's just tired of explaining himself to people of lesser intelligence. Like, he just wished anybody else would get on his level. Now, the actual Christmas Carol in this version is the final straw. Now, of course, the book was named A Christmas Carol because Dickens wanted it to be like an actual Christmas song, something that would be revised and reinterpreted and retold over the years. And never in his wildest dreams, I'm sure, could he have imagined the cottage industry of films and TV shows based on this story. But that's why it originally was named that. In this version, a person singing a Christmas carol outside is the straw that breaks his back, and it just gets him so on edge that he lashes out and actually comes to the door with a cane as if he's ready to strike. Now, I've seen a few Scrooges that do react with that sort of like, I'm gonna hit you with a cane sort of thing. I like with Patrick Stewart, he never acts like he's actually going to move forward. It is entirely based on the fear of that motion. He knows that they're not going to make him actually have to follow through on it. But I also do believe why somebody would feel threatened from the way he looks and acts in the scene. I said it earlier, but he says a lot of these lines as if there's never been any other actors say them, as if he's reading them for the first time, and he puts real thoughtful inflection in on them. Saying these lines is not an obligation to him like it is to some Scrooges who just feel the need to pitter-patter out all of Dickens's dialogue. Patrick Stewart fully makes it his own. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Sam Neill, how a lot of Sam Neill's dialogue in his movies, he kind of works in these little subtle pauses and ums and ers, and it sounds like he's thinking up these lines off the top of his head. I love that about Patrick Stewart's Scrooge. There's nothing pretentious about the language when he's saying it. Patrick Stewart said that's not good enough. I have to say this in a really unique way, and he does. In the pantheon of Scrooges, he is very unique in terms of his line delivery. Some moments like the door knocker are genuinely unsettling, but not as downright scary as Zemeckis' film. Now we're about to get into the ghosts, but before we do, I feel the need to mention some of the other great actors in this movie. Richard E. Grant, for instance, plays Bob Cratchit, and he's a phenomenal Bob Cratchit. Bernard Lloyd also plays Marley's ghost, and for my money, he's one of the best Marley's ghosts. In fact, we'll talk more about him in a minute, but I wanted to kind of just bring up a few of those people. Joel Grey, for instance, plays the Spirit of Christmas Past. Much like the George C. Scott production, Marley at first appears in the hearth in various religious images. This is another version where the hearth has those little religious biblical images in it. And I'm told actually that this is pretty common in a lot of Victorian fireplaces to have these little Bible stories. Maybe it is, but it always seems a little funny to me that they are in Scrooge's house, of all places. The effects really hold up very well in these scenes. And again, when Marley comes in, the effects hold up pretty well, but the effects are not the big deal for this particular version. What's really great is Marley himself. As I said, maybe one of the best Marleys. In fact, I would say he's on a par with Marley in the 1984 version. Marley fully convinces me that he's a spirit in purgatory or hell, suffering, and that his suffering is really the ultimate misery of his life. Totally convinces me of that. He's also a Marley that you see really tearful, and you genuinely can believe this guy regrets almost every day of his mortal life.
I cannot rest. I cannot stay anywhere. Oh, never to be able to make amends. The suffering I caused others is being repaid. At this time of the rolling year, I suffer most.
Again, we get another version where Marley's jaw drops down, and I had some people correct me on this, okay? Some people were saying, oh, bro, it's in the book. It says Marley's jaw dropped to his chest. Yes, I know. I read the book many, many times, okay? But that could just mean, and in fact, I've always imagined it being like the George C. Scott production. There's nothing outlandish about the idea that when your jaw drops open, it hits your chest. That's all that line means. And unless you can show me something in the book to convince me otherwise, that's what I'm going to continue believing. Because this is just ridiculous. It's not scary. It's not intimidating or unnerving. It's just gross. And I just think that is a huge missed opportunity, and a waste of special effects money to put into that scene. Especially because I think it kind of takes away from this phenomenal performance. Marley truly is one of the most tragic Marleys I've ever seen. And it just distracts from everything when his jaw does that. I also really enjoy how Scrooge doesn't immediately become a cowering little boy. He stays a very strong, tight, stiff upper lip, chin up sort of man. And he's like,
Speak comfort to me, Jacob.
I have none to give.
that sort of weakness just would not be in character for this version of Scrooge. We also see all the spirits who long to intervene in mortal affairs, but have lost their power forever. This is another scene that is usually skipped, and when it's put into a movie, it's typically pretty overblown. This film keeps it very subtle and keeps the focus on one particular spirit. I think that works a lot better than the Alastair Sim version having so many spirits that it's kind of hard to tell where to look, or, God forbid, the Zemeckis film, which almost makes it into a joke. Again, Joel Grey plays the Ghost of Christmas Past, and I think he is my favorite Ghost of Christmas Past ever. Part of that is because Joel Grey, at the best of times, has a very uncanny looking face. And that's no insult. He made a great career off of that uncanny looking face. But there is just something weird looking about him. He almost looks like an alien wearing a human mask. And it's perfect. His delivery is perfect. He is the only Christmas Past I think I've ever seen who laughs a couple times. He genuinely is having a good time. Sometimes at Scrooge's expense, but sometimes just in the moment. He actually seems kind of happy to be there. I like that about him. And his costuming is way better than the costuming of Angela Pleasance in the 1984 version. Now, whenever I watch a movie with great transitions and I make a video about it, I always make a point to mention it. And that's because transitions are often the last thing that filmmakers consider. This is a film that I can totally see the director at some point thinking, you know what all the other Christmas Carol versions were missing? You know what all of them did really badly? Transitions. None of them really make you believe that you're going from one time period or one place to another. And all except three transitions in this are perfect. Just look at that. That is smooth as glass, my friends. Every transition in a movie should be that smooth. Now, here's a little part where the music is just phenomenal. Take a listen to this.
I will shake away the cloudy skies with a California lullaby. And when you're frozen with desire, we'll put our toes up to the fire.
Something really nice about this being a TV movie is that they don't feel the need to rush or try to meet a certain time for the sake of playing in multiple theaters at once. And that's a real strong suit of this movie because, for instance, Fezziwig gets a lot of time to breathe. We get to know Fezziwig better in this version than in any other version. And that's because his scene, he kind of steals the show. It's almost more about him than it is young Ebenezer. And when he's performing and singing his song, and he's not particularly great, but the fact of the matter is everybody loves him, and you can see they all look forward to him singing his silly songs every year. And when Belle and Scrooge have their little moments together, it's all in silence, it's all visual. Gosh, it's just so wonderfully done. Probably the best moment in the Fezziwig scene is one of my favorite moments of subtlety with Scrooge. I said before, he's a very subtle characterization, and that includes his redemption as he moves from a curmudgeon to a new man, a new creation, if you will. And that is kind of summed up in this little scene where we see him still looking very tight-fisted, very straight-faced, but the camera pans down and we see he's tapping his feet to the music. He does want to go back to this, even if he can't really bring himself to fully admit that. Now we get a departure from the source material with this line.
Looking back, perhaps things seem better than they really were. But no, it was just like this.
At first, Scrooge is hurt by the past, belittling Fezziwig. Then he tries to kind of maintain that cynicism, almost saying like, yes, you're right. It can't have been as good as this. This is just my memory making things better than they are. And then finally collapsing into acceptance. No, it was this good. And I did lose it. I did lose out on all of this. And so when he has the realization that he could be recreating this sort of joy in the life of those around him, it means more because he had that kind of moment of resistance and denial before realizing, no, whatever I told myself to convince myself that I couldn't do this, it's wrong. and I've wasted time. This is also one of the best versions of Belle leaving, primarily because of the cinematography and the editing. It keeps the focus much more on old Ebenezer witnessing these events than on young Ebenezer and Belle, and I think that's actually for the best. All of these memories really should be about how they affect Scrooge, and sometimes we're seeing these memories without seeing Scrooge's reaction to them. And this version really pushes in on Scrooge as a character and how this is all affecting him. I think one of the reasons why Patrick Stewart's Scrooge works so well is his restraint. I've mentioned that before, but the fact is he doesn't yell very much. So whenever he does get loud, it really means something, unlike some of the Scrooge who just go around screaming the whole movie. Now, the scene where he puts the cap on Christmas Past to extinguish the light of truth is quite well done here. No, the effect doesn't fully work and doesn't fully hold up, but that being said, I think it's probably the best this scene has ever been done in terms of the actual effects. But it doesn't really top the '84 version for me, simply because Angela Pleasant saying, "Truth lives," that really adds attention to the whole scene. And this one, unfortunately, has a commercial break at the end, so we don't really see how that scene ends. It just kind of starts, and then we move on to the next scene. Desmond Barrett plays Christmas Present, and although at first he seems happy enough, and they even make him giant through a green screen that doesn't entirely work, I gotta say, I'm not a huge fan of this Christmas Present. I really do believe him when he's saying the dramatic, darker bits of the story, but I don't believe it so much when he's supposed to be happy, mainly because he almost never does act happy or jovial, and there should be an element of fun to the Christmas Present ghost that I just didn't get in this version. Again, with great transitions. And we even get this great little line about him giving kind of a seasoning or blessing to everything.
And would that apply to any meal on this day?
To a poor one most of all, because it needs it most.
I get from this version of Bob Cratchit more than any other a tired man who is trying to put on a strong face for his family. But it's real. It's not like the Zemeckis film where we have to have a close-up of him dropping the act, or some of the other versions where it seems too much like a front. No, in this, it's a genuine act. There's just a couple of moments where we see the mask slip a little bit. That's more realistic, and in this case, I think it's more dramatic. The family complimenting Mrs. C is the best I've ever seen, and Tim trying to chew this huge bite so that he can also compliment her is really adorable. And we get the full speech that I mentioned in last year's review of the '84 film, where Christmas Present says,
"If you be a man in your heart, forbear that wicked cant, until you've discovered what the surplus really is and where it is."
Will you decide what men shall live, what men shall die? Oh God, to hear the insect on the leaf pronouncing there is too much life among his hungry brothers in the dust.
Now, I've said a lot that I don't really like Mrs. Cratchit's little speech that she gives in front of their kids, basically belittling Bob's efforts to be positive and teaching their kids that, no, you should wish ill on those who wish ill on you, which runs exactly contrary to what Bob is trying to cultivate in his children. But everybody has bad moments, whatever. But it really does sell in this version how belittling her little speech is. When you see Bob's face just looks so crushed that she's saying all of this when he's trying to show love and forgiveness and positivity. However, Christmas Present's little laugh in this moment does make it kind of worth sitting through it again.
He'll be about as merry as a graveyard on a wet Sunday.
Several versions have Christmas Present take Scrooge to different locations in a montage where he hears various different people from various walks of life singing a Christmas carol. And this version probably has my favorite adaptation of that moment. It's funny to see how different versions inspire other versions, because there's nothing really one-to-one analogous of this moment from the book. It's beautifully executed, despite the fact that the effects don't entirely hold up. After this moment, we go to Fred's party, and Fred's defense of his uncle is very personal in this version. I like how they focus the entire scene in on it. Fred, Your uncle's like this. And Fred's like, I'm not going to say anything against him. Why wouldn't you say anything against him? A little private moment. Then he goes back in and his wife starts this back up as a public conversation. And there's different variances and different colors to this rather than just making it a big monologue like it is in most versions. I also like that while most versions of Christmas Past just kind of hang out while the games are happening, this version tries to leave, but Scrooge asks to stay because it's just been so long since he's seen a party game in action. It takes this moment with the game and turns it from a kind of superfluous moment that we could cut out into a really personal experience for Scrooge. He wants to be part of this atmosphere, and he's realizing the regret in saying no to being there. Christmas Present also has this strangely unique little moment where he takes Scrooge to visit people in prison, and he shows how he's blessing the people in prison and giving them some hope and some happiness that their lives are devoid of the rest of the year. It's really touching. Ignorance in want is represented very, very well here.
If you deny him, then doom will engulf you all.
Now, the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come is my favorite ghost in any version, and I always mention that. And this is a striking interpretation. It's not my favorite, but it's very finely done. I'm never a fan of when a human hand is being used. I think it should be a skeletal or deformed-looking hand, but this is probably my favorite version to do that, because the proportions are so off and so uncanny, and the whole structure of this creature is kind of bent in a funny way, and even the glowing eyes add this strange otherworldliness to the whole costume. Again, not my favorite version. That still is held by the 1984 version. But this? Not a bad effort at all. We get another great transition, and we go into the classic Mrs. Dilber trading away Scrooge's stuff, this time with a few other people as well. Now, this scene is in most versions, and I don't mind it. In fact, I like the scene. I just think that this is a little too long. It feels like this scene could have been drastically cut down. But that being said, I do like how clearly Scrooge realizes what is happening. When we go to the bedchamber scene, I love to see the Ghost of Christmas Future's eyes narrow. However they did that, I assume it's like some sort of puppetry or animatronic. Man, I love the eyes on this thing. It's super cool. Now, the bedchamber scene is probably the scene that gets cut the most from the future sequence. But I really like when they include it, and there's something great about the way Stewart delivers these lines.
I understand what you want me to do, Spirit. I would do it if I could. I've not the power, Spirit.
Something else that I really enjoy is that Patrick Stewart makes it clear that he is realizing what is happening. He's not stupid like some Scrooges. He actually is putting the pieces together and realizes that this could be his future. These are two of the three transitions that I said I don't really like. I think they just don't work. I mean, they're really weird and out of place considering how smooth the others are. And what's odd is I think you could really simply improve these transitions with almost no effort. In fact, I'm going to do kind of a mock-up to show you how I personally would have done it, and you tell me if you don't think it's a little bit better. Again, I'm not trying to say, oh, I would have edited the whole film better or something, but I'm just saying the rest of it's so good, I wish they would have paid more attention to this specific transition. In Christmas Yet to Come's Cloak, we get the scene where Scrooge's death gives a reprieve to some of his debtees, and I always like this scene whenever it's included. This is a very good version of it. Bob mourning over Tim's dead body is one of the saddest versions I ever heard. And that's pretty much all due to a couple of very simple lines of dialogue chosen for this scene.
Tim, don't be afraid. We'll always love you. Always.
After we leave the Cratchits, we go to the graveyard. Now, Scrooge says all of his lines approaching Christmas Yet to Come, who is already at the gravestone. I like this little change because a lot of versions, he's like right there at the gravestone and just refusing to look. But this is kind of a journey for him. He's walking to his own grave. How cool is that? And even then, when he gets to the gravestone, he takes a little moment to steel himself to look at the tombstone because he knows what he's going to see. It's more of a realization that he's already dead. Most people say, am I the man upon the bed, as if to say, like, it could be my future, but in this case, he makes it very clear he's realizing, holy crap, this isn't the future at all. I'm dead, aren't I? The grave opening to show Scrooge already in the grave, is such an awesome moment. However, I personally think they should have cut straight from this to him back in the bedroom, almost like he's waking up from the ultimate nightmarish scenario and he just snaps awake from it. Instead, they do the third transition that really doesn't work. This really cheesy falling through an endless portal into hell sort of thing. I don't really know what they were thinking with that one because it does not look good. Scrooge waking up and his entire redemption is done really, really well. In fact, it's done all in one shot. And I think that Patrick Stewart delivers these lines fantastically. I really do believe the joy he's feeling. But there's only one moment in the whole film that phenomenally does not work for me, and it's in this scene. It's when Scrooge gives his first laugh. Presumably he hasn't really laughed in years. And he does this kind of choking, gagging thing where it's like he's like forgotten how to laugh. I get what he was trying to go for as an actor. I don't know if it was his idea or the director's idea. It really is such an uncomfortable moment, and I don't like it at all. It comes across honestly as funny, and that is not what you wanted in that scene. That being said, maybe it works for somebody, it just does not work for me. But it's the only thing in this whole version that I feel that way about, so I guess kudos if you have one moment I don't like in your entire movie. Scrooge taking a little moment to just appreciate the cold air on his face is so great. And Scrooge's interchange with the little boy, and even his exchange with the butcher, is possibly better in this version than almost any other version, because you can feel him still kind of holding on, like, do it and I'll give you a shilling. Do it in 5 minutes and I'll give you 2 shillings. It's like he's struggling for it. But then by the time he gives the butcher money for a cab and tells him to keep the change, he's kind of starting to loosen up and be like, yeah, just take the money. I'm really happy even though I don't look like it. But then the next scene, we see him walking down the street, greeting people, putting money in a beggar's cup. He really is just a new man by the next scene, but I like that he has to build up to it. He's just not instantaneously different. Scrooge has a little snowball fight with some kids, and he even goes to church, presumably for the first time in a long time. It's also hilarious because he doesn't know the lyrics to these Christmas carols they're singing. I love any version that includes Ebenezer going to church, since A Christmas Carol is primarily a defense of Christian ethics and taking care of the poor. Kind of the ultimate version of the parable in Matthew where Jesus talks about the lambs and the goats. Scrooge also paces outside Fred's house for a few minutes before deciding he has to make himself knock and come in. I really love the 84 version, so I really have a hard time choosing between them. I think I like that version better for how personal it is. But I love the humility it took for Scrooge to come in and say this confession and apologize in front of the whole party. That's a whole other level. Scrooge even dances for the first time, presumably since Belle left him. What an addition! I love this scene. It might be one of my favorite scenes in any Scrooge film ever. We get the classic scene where Scrooge fakes Cratchit out. In this version, Bob does something which I've seen in a few other versions, where he thinks Scrooge has gone mad, so he grabs the fire poker to defend himself. There's a great little epilogue read by Fred. You get that in a lot of versions, but what I like about this one is that we see Scrooge alone in most of this epilogue. He's sitting at home, but now his home is clean, and he's got a roaring fire, not a dying little fire to save coal. He's sitting in a comfy chair, and he has candles lit to give light, because though darkness is cheap and he liked it, now he's willing to expand a little bit, to expend more, and that includes even taking better care of himself as well as others. You don't get that in any other Scrooge that I've ever seen. We end with the classic image of Scrooge holding Tim, and we even see the entire Cratchit family's reacting to Scrooge, literally taking them into his home. Guys, I don't know why I didn't like this version when I was younger. I'm almost ashamed that I didn't, because it is a phenomenal version of this story. It changes some stuff, but not any more than any other version, and in fact, most of the key stuff stays the same. A lot like the 84 version, and I think this is why I like both of them so much. Didn't mean to compare them so much in this, because they really are different, but I think that's the reason I like both of them. The big stuff is the same. The big moments are kept the same. but they're read different. They're interpreted different. It's the little things, the contextual things, the subtextual things that make these versions stand out as two of the very, very best. I love Alastair Sim, but Alastair Sim's version gets all the attention. And I think there are some other great versions. And if you want my recommendation for the next one you check out, I actually might even recommend this one before George C. Scott. It's got a more modern feel for a modern audience. And if you can get by some of the effects not entirely working, I don't think you could possibly regret watching it. If you love this story and you've not seen it yet, you owe it to yourself to watch it. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for watching One Christmas, and I hope your Christmas is blessed and filled with good cheer and love, and just like the story of Scrooge itself professes, remember those less fortunate than you. Remember to spend some of your Christmas taking care of those who don't have all the blessings you have. Thank you, everybody, for watching. God bless you, and Merry Christmas.